this episode of the Fireside Chat. It's been a while since I've done one of these. And, we've been on holiday for the last little while, and it's a new year. We're going to be having some new guests, and we're going to be talking about some, new stuff. So with me today, as always, is Andrew Valkuskus, who I will continue to pronounce his name wrong, as it takes effort to pronounce it correctly. And our guests today are Luke Crane and Thor. I'm going to do my best here. Alsford, maybe? Was I close?
Tor Olafsrud.
There you go.
Hey,
so,
Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year. That's a good point. It's
Happy
a good way
New
to start
Year
us
to
off.
everybody.
So we keep a pretty casual format here at the Fireside Chat, and so the first thing we usually like to do is just give the guests kind of an opportunity to give a quick rundown of yourselves, what you do, and who you are. So,
sure. My name's Luke Crane. I am a game designer living in New York City, and I'm the designer of Burning Wheel, Mouse Guard, and Torchbearer with Tor, my co-designer and editor.
And I'm Tor. I also live in New York City. Been working with Luke on games, almost 20 years. Starting with, I guess we were working on Burning Wheel Classic back in the day. I've also edited a number of other indie games. Been around the block a few times.
Very cool. Well, I've still got to get down to New York City Comic Con. That's been on our list, and we're not far. We're based out of Montreal, so it's a shame how we've kind of missed out on that one. You guys, I'm sure it's your home con. You guys do that all the time?
I have only done Comic Con once. I think Luke has done it a few times with David, right?
Yeah, when we were doing more of the comics-oriented games, when we did Burning Empires and Mouse Guard, obviously, we were at Comic-Con frequently, but it's changed a lot. It's just this massive, media properties now, not a lot of room for little guys like us.
Oh, really? Okay, so it's not like, I guess, the Montreal Comic Con, which is kind of a nice little mix of, you've got tabletop publishers, you've got comic celebrities, you've got Artist Alley, you've got all kinds of, just geek shops.
It's really balanced. Like, you even have Sony, right next to, gaming stores and stuff like that as well. So it's... I don't
know if New York is quite like San Diego Comic Con, but it's approaching that. Obviously, I don't know what it's been like under the current situation, but it used to just sell out. The tickets were almost impossible to get.
Well, let's roll it back a little bit. How did you guys get into tabletop gaming? I mean, was it board gaming, RPGs, and how did you guys segue into designing your own role-playing game?
Or you do this one first.
All right. My first exposure, I've always loved games, but my first exposure was probably Christmas back in 1980. I don't want to say. One of my schoolmates, was my secret Santa, because you did that in school back then, and gave me the red box as a
That's
gift,
awesome.
and that was where it all started, and I was obsessed. Was playing games ever since. But even, I definitely have some experience with war games too. I remember my Latin teacher was a big war gamer, and he had one of the Avalon Hill games. It was about the 7 Hills of Rome. And we wound up playing that in class while the rest of the class watched. It was super fun.
Yeah, if you want to take it all the way to tabletop games, thank my mom for trouncing me in Scrabble over and over and over again when I was a kid.
Has that changed now that you're an adult?
I've managed to hold the line. I mean, she's like the Patriots of Scrabble. I'm never going to catch up, but I've managed to win a few games here and there. And she would do I learned a little something about gameplay and civility and game design, because I'm just not as good at the game as she is at this point, and so I'm struggling. And she's like, "Let me see your letters. Oh, here you have hat You could, and that never helped. That never made me feel like I was winning. But yeah, my first RPG was with some kids. My mom kicked me out of the house for a summer, and I went and stayed with my uncle in Maryland, and they had the D&D expert book, and we played. I had played a dwarf with chainmail and an axe. But then when I came back, I taught one of my friends had an older brother who had some role playing games too, and I asked him if he wanted to play, and he busted out Paranoia, and we played
Okay.
one-on-one Paranoia as we played it straight as like dark sci-fi, not as a comedy game. It was really fun.
Yeah, that's going to open your eyes to something different than D&D. Because I found a lot of people that started out with the basic D&D, the red boxes, the expert sets. You were kind of set into that fantasy roll for initiative, elves and dwarves. What's my XP? Let's loot. And then when you get these other RPG experiences around late 80s, early 90s that were coming out, they really changed the paradigm. And Paranoia was one of them for sure.
Yeah.
So, out of curiosity, though, like, what transitioned you from like being gamers to actually getting into the publishing space, though? So, like, what was that like, and what was kind of like your first project with that?
Oh, I'll fess up. I shanghaied Tor. I tricked him mercilessly, like I was some fake creature, um, promising him some, shimmering gold off in the foggy forest, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, sounds great. Right this way, sir." Um, I just thought it would be a good idea. I mean, I started designing almost immediately after I started playing, and which I think is a pretty common response for most of us. When we touch these games, they're so robust and interesting, and there's such a huge space to design into these games. So I think lots of folks just start designing their own rules or classes or monsters or whatever. So yeah, I started designing immediately. Someone had given me Avalon Hill's Wizard's Tower, and I just threw the rules out and took the map and the goblin counters and started designing my own game. But yeah, and then that just kept going over the years until eventually I I reached a point of frustration and designed a complete rule set for our group to play with, and then we played it. We played a campaign, and it was kind of fun. This is before I met Tor, a couple of years before I met Tor. It was so fun that we kind of looked at each other and we were like, "Whoa, what's going on here? Like maybe we should do something with this." And 2 years of writing and editing later, my friends were like, "Okay, you need to stop. This has become a problem. Like you've gone too far." But I didn't. I kept going, and then a couple of years after that, I met Tor at a con, and he can tell this part of the story.
Yeah, basically, I said, hey, I'd seen Luke around on forums. I think the Forge, which is why I recognized Burning Wheel, and I immediately sat down for a demo. And I think it was a fight demo. I think it was Van Goten's Predicament, where you're a knight trapped on top of a farmhouse with some farmers getting attacked by orcs.
Classic.
And and my guy got utterly annihilated. I think he got smashed to death by an orc with a shield, and I just fell in love. So at the con, I was like, hey, I'm an editor. If you ever need any help, let me know. I'd love to work on something with you. And so Luke was working on the Monster Burner at the time, which was the first supplement for Burning Wheel. And that book is still a mess, by the way. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I've been, as he said, I've been lured in, like a fly trapped in amber, ever since.
All right. And so, what would you guys say that was probably like some of the trials and tribulations of creating kind of a social combat role for Burning Wheel? I'm actually really curious about that. It was very unique for the system for the time. So what would you say is probably that point there?
Well, I mean, that was initially created for a game that never came out, right?
Yep.
Apollon Noir.
Yep.
Huh.
Apollyon Noir. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the guys that I met through these forums that we were all inhabiting in 2002, 2004, Jason Roberts, is that right, Tor? Uh, had co-designed this game called Fulminata, which is this really fascinating game. You don't really see very many of these, but it was Roman era RPG, and it was alternate history, Roman era. What if the Romans had gunpowder? That was their like alternate history.
My favorite thing about this game, though, and it was just exciting design happening all the time back then, was that your initiative in it was still like a combat game with gunpowder and all that sort of thing, but your initiative was based on your social class, right? If you were a senator, you got to go before everyone else, which was just amazing.
At the time, like Burning Wheel me, who was working on these like intense, like real time fencing rules, was like, what the fuck? But a couple years distance from that, and I have stolen that mechanic so many times. It's such a great, like really evocative piece of design. So simple and so wonderful. But anyways, Jason approached me to do a Napoleonic game with him, like not. And we were talking about what system to use, and so of course I wanted to use Burning Wheel, and so I pitched hard, and they were like, well, it's got to have this and this, and I was like, okay, hold on, I'll get back to you. And so I worked up a version of the fighting rules, but as social combat for that game for Apollyon Noir, which never really made it past that like kind of drafting and pitching phase.
Yeah, because I think for me, like Burning Wheel is synonymous with the first crunchy social combat that I'd seen in any RPG. Everything had been reductionist until Burning Wheel in terms of dealing with a tense situation socially. Like in a movie, normally it'd be just a charisma check, or just like you'd be reductionist to like one roll. Whereas you'd have to come up with an argument and a premise, and state your intentions and things like that. And Burning Wheel is a lot more of a structure in terms of how you would resolve this, and it kind of made it a lot more interesting than just one die roll. And
the interesting thing there is that was not part of the game until the second edition, Burning Wheel Revised.
Huh.
Right, yeah. And so many of the mechanics that people think of as like core Burning Wheel didn't show up until that second version. Duel of Wits, resources, circles.
That's really interesting.
Did we have range and cover in Revised? I don't remember.
No, range and cover is gold, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think I discovered it then in Revised. What year did Revised come out in?
2005.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a much better organized, clearer expressed game because I had an editor working with me from the first draft.
Yeah, I don't have the books with me right now, but they're on the shelf. They're smaller, like novel-sized books, right?
Yeah.
No, so that's it. Like when I saw that combat, those rules in there, it's like the first time I'd seen it in an RPG. And I was like, wow! Like just light bulb went off, and I'm like, we need to see more of this in RPGs. And it took me a while for us to formulate this in our system. Our system only added this in our last iteration for social combat, because we really need it. We're getting into a setting where it's going to be a lot more diplomacy, cloak and dagger type of settings. And so we added our own social combat as well. But I mean, it really started, like, for me, it was always Burning Wheel was where it all started.
Oh man, it was controversial back in the day too.
Really?
Oh yeah. There were a lot of people that really hated the idea. There were lots of flame wars on RPGNet because of it.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So what were some of the pros and the cons that you guys faced when you guys launched this?
I mean, we have never really bowed to public sentiment We do what we want.
Yeah, I'm curious about like just the player arguments, pros and cons.
There was a lot of
You want
don't
to tell them about the boat?
character.
Pardon?
The boat?
Oh, well, I mean, we felt the need for this system too, even though it didn't go into the original draft of Burning Wheel. It's funny; it was laying there like this kind of big dark secret in our group that we played very hard. We played really long campaigns that would go from scrappy adventuring into politics and bigger picture stuff. But the secret, like emergent property of the social combat stuff was that it allowed us to resolve our differences between characters at the table. Like not just like let's argue with the prince, but let's argue with each other about a course of action, and everyone gets to feel like they had their say. They get a compromise, and that really changed the way we played Burning Wheel, and it made us much more civilized to one another. Well, I mean, maybe it's like that old myth of like, when there's a gun on the table, everyone's a lot more polite to one another. So when there's the social gun. Anyway, so yeah, so in our group it had a huge effect, but online, yeah, people gave us the bullshit about don't tell me how to play my character, or I don't need this. Like I can use my words. I can't use a sword at the table. All these very specious, like just very puzzling reactions to the mechanics. Yeah, the other one that they reacted to with just like very strange fits was the let it ride rule. Basically, in Burning Wheel, you just roll once for for one situation unless something changes. It's really commonplace, and really it's not too far afield from even basic D&D, which says like if you fail, find another way. That got perverted and into like I don't know what, second edition or something, where you could like keep checking different difficulties. I don't know. Anyway, but we had that rule in there, and people just got real mad at me on the internet. It was very strange. It seems like such a hilarious thing to for people to get mad at me on the internet about, but
I don't understand this concept, because it's like if you don't like the rule, just don't use it and just keep playing the game. I mean, like it's
when it's something that's brand new. When it's something that's brand new, people are very, very opinionated, especially when it's a system that they're passionate about. So it's really good. Like the fact that people were very vocal about it means they really cared about your system. It's usually when people are like, shrug, whatever. That's the bad sign. When someone starts talking about D&D removing alignments or removing attributes or saving throws or whatever, then everyone just loses it. But now I think social combat, I mean, there's been many iterations of social combat since then. I mean, the RPG Smallville has done it, Monster Hearts has done it, many RPGs have done it, and I think it's here to stay. And there's a lot of RPGs, it's kind of core to their setting, right? And people have done it in very interesting ways too.
I think part of what I would say about Pool of Wits is that in retrospect, after we added it, it was clear that the game required it, right? Like the design required it, because it's a game about fighting for your beliefs, right? It's a game where people are passionate about what they believe and are trying to enact that in the world, and you need the ability to do that with words as well as violence. Although some might argue that the words are more dangerous than swords in Burning Wheel.
Well, it scratches the itch for a lot of like power gamers that just want to roll dice at the table. And so for them, they're sitting there waiting for combat to break out, because that's when they get to roll dice. That's when they get to use their cool powers. But if the RPG has a really robust social combat system where you get to roll dice and you do get social powers and you get equipment that gives you bonuses and minuses to social combat, then you don't need to draw a sword. You don't need to kill someone to actually scratch that itch for those gamers. Then they can get their, power gaming at the table without having to resort to violence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once you put the structure of the system in place, then it starts kind of creating the bounds of reality for these folks. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, that it's there, and so we're going to use it, but also like you said, it's not just a simple tool that we left for people to use. We left it with some complexity so that they could invest in it. They could build whole characters around it. It wasn't just like, this hammer they could pick up and just whack somebody on the head with. It was, that they're the entire expression of who they were, and they could start from the jump as that. They could start as a social monster and play that out, or they could start, as often is the case, with adventurers with no redeeming social skills whatsoever, and then grow into it, as the campaign wears on, because of the way our advancement rules work. And that has really been one of the more powerful experiences that people have had playing the games, is like watching their characters become people with opinions and be shaped by their experiences.
And I think even in the BWHQ home group, we're often more willing to have starting characters that don't have combat skills than we are to have starting characters that don't have social skills.
Yeah.
For sure. Now, I am curious though, since I'm hearing, this kind of like back and forth. You've heard got some feedback from like some people who've played your game. In retrospect, if you were to change something regarding the social combat, 20 years after looking at it now, what would that be? If you could.
Yeah.
Also saying you wouldn't is also an acceptable answer. So
no.
We played around a little bit with it in Torchbearer, right? I mean, we have a new mechanic in Torchbearer Second Edition called Precedence, which is your social standing and what you're able to bring to the table, who you're able to engage with, I mean, that's something that we've been struggling with in some of our Burning Wheel games. I think Blossoms Are Falling actually did some really cool stuff with that we didn't bring forward to the core game.
Yeah, Precedence that I stole from Fulminata. That's one of the things I stole, right? Because it determines, how your starting position in a duel of wits, and like a senator will just crush you in a duel of wits if you're not at the right social station. The original one has one leader and then helpers versus one leader and helpers. Though we iterated on that, further down the line to allow for multiple participants, but I feel like that was a missed opportunity right out of the gun, is to have group duels, right, where go ahead, Tor.
I was just going to say we learned that from Mouse Guard.
Yeah. We changed it. A few years later, Mouse Guard, but we call it the patrol method, right? You're on patrol and everybody's gonna have their say. The other thing that we learned that we couldn't know then is the escalation of stakes, and there's a very basic negotiating tactic that happens when you get familiar with the system, which is you go in planning to ask for too much in order to get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a nice bit of jeopardy there where if you win, you might get too much. And sometimes if you're playing the right kind of properly intriguing campaign with all the kind of weights and balances around your actions, then sometimes getting too much is actually bad. But the players become very cunning very quickly in terms of trying to drop this perfect stakes bomb in there so that they get, they can't lose, essentially. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's kind of a great meta, but I just wish that I could address it in the text, or maybe even insert some limit breaks, or some more subtle ones. Because I mean, there is one the original one is the best one, where the other side can just say "fuck you, no" and walk away. But providing some more guidance on how to do that, what's some stakes for what's too much with a character. The other thing is, I feel like reputation, which is part of the finding people skill, doesn't play enough into duel of wits, and I wish that you could leverage your reputation to create an aura or intimidate someone or something like that in the social combat system, which it makes sense. I mean, if you ever met your idol, there is that risk of kind of falling into their aura.
I mean, that's sort of along the lines of what we did in Blossoms, not with reputation, obviously, but with etiquette and position.
Yeah.
Right? You could, if you were of higher position in Blossoms, you could force an etiquette test and set the language of the duel, like whether the other participants could refer to themselves in the first as I, right? It
This
was so
was
cool. It was fun.
This was insane. This was a completely failed experiment, but it was so fun. Yeah, we put a rule in where if you won an etiquette test, you could set the level of familiarity because it's supposed to be like very formal Japanese courtly politics. And in the highest level of formality, you couldn't say anything negative, and you couldn't refer to yourself in the first person.
And so you'd have to be like we, basically, or like us,
or you know,
one.
this, yeah,
okay,
one, or you know, this poet.
Yeah.
Third person.
Yeah. Third person, right.
Yeah.
Players fucking hated it.
It was great. I loved it.
But that's it. It takes all kinds of players. You can always have these little optional rules that you put on the sidebars. And I think the sidebars are really big winners for those kinds of things, like where you're saying you need to call something out to help guide the GM through a scenario, or how do you give guidelines on how an NPC is going to, tell them to F off because they're asking for too much. For us, for example, we've got values as part of the social combat structure. Is when you create your character, even NPCs, everyone has values. And if you're coming in with a question, a compel, or a provoke that contravenes one of those values, unless you're throwing in a certain type of attack that can nullify some of those values would immediately, let's just say, it fails. So you'd have to have like a class or an archetype built up to try and break down certain values. And you can never break down all the values. Be good at breaking down some types of values. So yeah, you'd never be able to say, like, okay, if the guard's guarding a gate and that's his job. Oh yeah, just go and take a walk. No, that's my job. I'm not going to go take a walk. Like, what are you talking about? That's like the worst thing you can ask a guard to do. That's his MO. The guard.
You need some leverage there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's super cool.
I personally adore the idea of limiting how people can talk in a conversation, because
Me too.
it's kind of like conversational landmines. I adore that idea, but I can definitely see why some people didn't like it. But no, I would love that kind of torment at the table. Of course, I guess I'm a little sadistic to my players. Though I am curious because you guys mentioned like mouse guard earlier. So like, how exactly does that relate? I haven't actually had a chance to talk about it, so I'm just curious. How did you guys land it? And if you can just give me a bit of like a rundown of what it is for the viewers who are not familiar.
Sure. Mouse Guard's role-playing game we did with Archaea Boom in 2008. Oh yeah, there you go.
Love this box.
Second edition box set, nice.
Yeah, it's the best. It's the best box set.
It's too good. Like, I don't even understand. Like, how can you guys make a profit on what's in here? But we'll talk about that after.
Yeah, well, that is the benefit of having a publisher in this case. So yeah, I'm just the designer on that one. We actually don't publish. Yeah, and it's based on the comics by David Peterson of the same name, Mouse Guard, and he did all the art. He wanted an RPG done. He wanted to do all the art for the RPG, and he wanted it done in a very particular way. And I knew David's publisher at the time. He's a friend of ours, and he was also a role-playing game designer and a comic artist. He did an incredible comic series called Artesia.
Mark Smiley we're talking about.
Yep.
So I actually introduced Mark and David to a friend of mine who I felt, Clinton, who I felt was a good match. Clinton was the one who actually showed me the comic and was super excited about it. And so I said, yeah, they want to do an RPG, so go for it. It fell through. I guess they didn't really love Clinton's pitch. They tried to work with him on it, and it just didn't work out. And then I was at New York Comic Con, and they were like, "Do you want to give it a shot?" And I said, "Sure." And I ran home and grabbed Tor, and I was like, fuck. I signed another game.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah. We had also just done another comics-based game called Burning Empires, which was our sci-fi version of Burning Wheel, based on Christopher Muller's Iron Empires universe, which is a really intense game, really intense universe, really fun. Also, Christopher did 99% of the art for that game too, which was really fun. He's a master
Also, we now
artist.
publish those comics.
And we do publish those comics.
Oh, nice.
Too.
Nice.
So yeah, I came back and I wanted to do a version of Burning Wheel. We had done a version of Burning Wheel to satisfy us with Burning Empires, which means it was the most complicated version of Burning Wheel. And for Mouse Guard, I wanted to do a game to satisfy David's fans, and that would hit well with like a gamer family, where gamer parents could sit down and play with their kids, and then eventually they could turn the game over to their kids. And there's rules in there for how to like swap out game masters and whatnot, and again, how to build the adventures and kind of increase complexity. But we didn't design it as a children's game, or we didn't design it as like an entry level RPG. We just tried to design it as like the most stripped down version of Burning Wheel we could, that was talking to new players who were interested in the system. One of the things that like linguistically I tried to take out of the rules were imperatives. You must do this and you must do that and you must do this. They like, for us, I think it's fine. Like when we're like, a rule is like, dude. But for people who are just getting started, I was just watching, play testing, and people were getting stressed out by having to learn new rules. And so I really tried to like soften the tone, even if I wasn't going to back off on the particular rule.
We were also writing it in the second person, right? It was to you rather than.
Yeah. Most of it. That was tough because we had we had the comics universe, and so we kind of had to honor a lot of that lore. And I decided, we decided that we wanted the comic protagonists to be a part of the game, and so and the comic protagonist is a little boy mouse, and so there a lot of the rules talks about him and what he would do in these situations. So it's this weird split between we're talking to the player as you, and we're talking about the character as this very particular entity. I was rereading it recently, and I was like, oh yeah, we should have just gone all in for you. Yeah.
The other not so secret about this game is that it's our take on the mythos Call of Cthulhu.
How so?
That's true.
It's so cute, though.
At least in the original, this got softened a little bit in later issues of the comic, but in the version that we had access to, when we were working on this project, mice were the only sapient creatures. Mice and weasels were the only sapient creatures in the universe. All the other animals were of animal level intelligence, and so, but also everything eats mice. Squirrels eat mice. Deer eat mice. Everything eats mice. Everything in this world is a monster that will eat you and your children. And you are, living in this world and trying to survive. But there's actually an illustration in there. You might be able to find it. That is based on an old Call of Cthulhu illustration showing the sizes of humans versus Cthulhu and other like elder gods and all that sort of stuff. So that was our one nod to this idea.
Yeah, the moose is Cthulhu.
Yeah,
the moose was Cthulhu.
Yeah.
I'll flip through, but as I'm looking at this, I mean, it's like I'll just show everyone. There's like 4 decks of cards, 2 sets of dice. The quality of these books is just the paper quality is top notch, like cookbook level. This is, as a publisher, I look at this, I'm like, how much was the manufacturing for just one unit of this? I think I picked this up for like $50 or something at Gen Con. And did you guys make any money on this? Oh, I think I found it. There we go.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
People should not look to us for advice about how to successfully run a role-playing game company.
Yeah, because it's just as a publisher, I look at this and I'm just like, oh dear God, this is just painful to look at as a publisher. As a gamer, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Absolutely love what I'm getting here. As a publisher, I'm like, holy God, this hurts.
Well, yeah, imagine that you've got to pay for those materials costs, and then you're paying out royalties on top of that. David and I both have very nice royalties there. So we go through David's comic publisher, which is now Boom. It used to be Archaea, but it's now Boom. And they just have the muscle to, put down money for, big print runs of that. They also had the muscle to negotiate for a better, per unit price because they do so much business through their factories overseas. And that's the other thing, is that they print this stuff overseas. But I bet the cost per unit is like $20.
But the other thing is this thing's heavy. This is a heavy box. It's a small box, but this is heavier than most board games that are twice the size.
One thing that we learned between the first edition box and the second edition box was actually some stuff about making box sets, because the first edition had too much air in it. The box was too big. Which meant that we could only fit 4 units in a case when we were shipping it.
And it could get damaged because you can get some crumpling and crunching. Whereas here, I was giving Luke props because it was just, there's no air in there. I mean, he's got it down to super tight.
He studied for that box. I remember trying to figure it out. It was some nth level mathematics.
Well, we were talking about his Torchbearer box too, the new one that he's got. He's got it all down to CAD, down to millimeters in terms of how much space there's going to be inside that box. But I mean, that's just definite science. But I mean, it's just the weight of it too. So sometimes we get people that watch our stream that are industry people. So this is why we end up talking a lot about industry stuff as well. And so it's shipping these units as well to and from shows actually adds a lot of cost as well. So as a publisher, you're always cognizant of, okay, what are our shipping costs to the show? And then, okay, whatever units we don't sell, we have to ship back. So all this weight adds up, right? So that's a big consideration.
Yeah, I remember one Gen Con where we had everything shipped to the hotel because the con was going to charge freight costs. I think it was going to double our shipping costs. So we carried all of the boxes from the hotel to the con floor by hand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of us spoke to Luke that night.
Oh my God. Teeny tiny pro tip: if you ask the hotel if you can borrow their wheelie things, they're totally cool with it. If for next time you run in that
that's not going to happen again.
Okay. But still, we may have done that once, Andrew, so
yes, that happened with us with Unplugged. We ended up grabbing one of those wheelie things and just wheeled everything to and from the hotel
across the street. So.
Nice.
So let's fast forward to Torchbearer. Why don't you guys tell us how did that idea come about, and what put everything? What were the ingredients that went into that cooking pot that created that RPG?
There were a number of things going on. We had just released
this beautiful book right here,
Mouse the first edition, and as usual, there were things about our game that people didn't like, and one of them was the player's turn and the GM's turn of Mouse Guard, and I got kind of frustrated with the conversation about it, because I felt like we were just describing the way people play these games, and so I wanted to illustrate what that meant, and I came up, I was thinking about going the town phase and the adventuring phase. Camp phase came a little bit later in Torchbearer, but that was sort of the genesis of me, working on this idea, and I played around with it for a while, and then Luke took a look at it and was like, we've got to actually do something with this.
Or you were also obsessed with which Conan story, Red Nails or something? You were just completely obsessed, and trying to create scenarios or similar scenarios in mouse guard that like gave off that vibe.
I succeeded too. That game was crazy. In the
Conan
Dungeon of
mouse
the Moss
guard.
Lord.
That's awesome.
Yeah, crazy. Some of that stuff has come back in like in some of our Torchbearer adventures. The Secret Vault of the Queen of Thieves has a number of references to that adventure. But yeah, and so I was also I got laid off at around that time. It was around 2009. And so started really working on it, and then Luke came on board, and that's when things really started rolling. So I don't know if you have more to add.
Yeah, Tor showed me the manuscript, and I said, "Wow, you've done a lot of work. This is really cool. Let's do this." And he was like, "Yeah." And for a moment there, I believe I saw the Tor I met in 2004. The one that I led into the misty forest, looking for the glimmering gold. He was like, "Oh, yeah." Oh my God, it was like 4 years later for the first edition, and then
and at the last minute we tore Mittermark out of the game. And decided to do it as a supplement instead.
This beauty right here.
Yeah,
it screams Viking on every page that I look through, because it gets my seal of approval.
Thank you. It's not. I don't think it quite measures up to your Viking vibes, but we tried. We did our best.
I loved it. I was smiling all the way through.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That's great. That is a high compliment. So Mittermark. 4 years to the first edition of Mittermark, and then to Torchbearer, and then another 2-3 years to Mittermark.
Yeah.
After that,
maybe 2 years. Yeah.
And then after that, another 6 or 7 years for the second edition. Like, we had started working on the second edition very soon after Mittermark was finished. So
we've gotten a playtest report from one of our very close friends, who's also done a lot of editing for us, and he and his group had played through level 10 in Torchbearer, and he had some thoughts, some things that we could tweak, nothing big, just a few minor changes that he was going to suggest. And Luke and I looked at each other and were like, we're done. Yeah. We've got to completely rewrite the game.
Oh, really?
Because we knew from doing Burning Wheel Revised, it was the same thing. We were just going to tweak a few things and then release the game real quick. And no, we had to pull the game out of print and and rewrite it from scratch. And as soon as he, honestly, as soon as he said, you have to fix the bow. The bow is overpowered. This alarm went off the back of my head, and I was like, because the Torchbearer combat system, it's based on mouse guard. It's just a different type of balancing than like a D&D style combat system where you can just tweak damage up and down or tweak it to hit bonus or something. All the weapons are just tied into the action selection system, and they're tied into the character classes, and so as soon as he said we just need to rebalance that, I was like, oh, well, we're just gonna have to rebalance the entire combat system then. I think I actually cursed him out, if I remember correctly.
I absolutely did.
He smiled. He was pretty excited by getting us both to curse him out.
There's no way that you can make an editor happier than to get that reaction.
So that's the second edition that you were holding in your hands, the smaller books. Those are the ones with the fixed bow. So that should be on the back cover, right? The bow has been fixed.
Yeah,
it should be the text on the back of those books.
New and improved bow.
New and improved bow. That's what there should be a sunburst right here. Yeah, totally right. Yeah, this is the second edition. We made our bones in the digest size format, and so that was one reason to go back. But we also did the same thing that we did for Torchbearer First Edition, where we ripped the game in half, like very late into production. But basically, I wanted to make sure the game was a good teaching experience. As you know, a game has to be a teaching manual and a reference manual at the same time. And so that I felt like Torchbearer did a very good job of teaching up until like, I don't know, page 40 or 60 or something. And then it just starts like hitting you with lists and like, and just, just really bogs down in the minutia of the game, which is fine. The minutia was fine. It wasn't a good experience for someone sitting down with a game and trying to understand it. And so I split the books up so hopefully it would be conceptually easier to learn, and where you could go so deep into one book and say, okay, cool, and then go so deep into the other book and say, aha, and then go, oh, okay, now the latter half of this book is reference material, the latter half of this book is reference material. So I have everything I need to know right now. I don't need to read every word of both of these books to understand the game. Right. Time will tell if we hit that mark. Where the game is just getting to people's hands now, and so it probably won't hit the table for a few months at the earliest, but we shall see.
I mean, another element to that is there's a culture at our table, just the way that we play, where if the GM is interacting with a player and they're focused on each other, if there's a mechanical consideration going on, the other players at the table will grab their books and look stuff up and be ready to reference it for those people that are actively engaged at the moment.
That's really cool.
We found, especially in our early Burning Wheel play, that having the two books made it easier for that to happen because they were just more focused.
It's quicker to find. Yeah, where to go. Yeah, it's something we're considering with our latest Athleath RPG, the City book. City RPG, it's going to be 4 books, so we really wanted to break it down into these like small digest-sized books, as opposed to our latest book, which is Children of Area, which is like a telephone-sized RPG book. Right. So we're looking at both of those. But the other thing that I've noticed in an adjacent industry, the board game industry, which I want to take a page out of, is they're starting to look at more and more phone app tutorials or YouTube videos that teach you the game, because they realize that even their tiny little manuals compared to our RPG manuals, players don't want to read. They pop open the box and they look at I got to read these 16 pages of rules. That's just way too much. And so, then there's a little QR code, and they scan the QR code on the cover of the rule book, and it takes them to this app that says, are you ready to learn the game? We're about to teach you on your phone visually. And I think this is where probably RPGs are going to go next. This is something I'm seriously considering, and I think it would do our industry a really big service to embrace what everyone's carrying around in their pocket, and kind of where things have been working in the board game.
And not only that, but it also prevents them from being getting distracted by their phone while they're trying to play the game, because they have the reference right there. So I actually like that quite a bit. Huh. So I'm curious at this point. I mean, we've heard about all your projects, and I just want to know, in the future, is there anything maybe coming around the line? Any other future projects maybe cooking, behind the scenes that we don't know about?
Yes, always, always cooking.
That you can talk about, of course.
Yeah, well, the one that we can talk about is the one that I'm just slowly releasing, kind of piecemeal, is the Miseries and Misfortunes, which is my joke RPG, because it's a
joke no longer.
Yeah, it is a joke that has gone on too long.
It's a joke on you.
Yeah, exactly. It started as a hack of basic D&D with like musketeers and pikemen. A pike and shot version of basic D&D. And now it has become an actual serious historical RPG, still using the basic D&D core mechanics, but I've added social combat and life paths, and a dueling system like Burning Wheel. So I just can't help myself. We just re-released the mechanics books for that, and now I'm going to be releasing probably 3 more books for it this year. They're small. These are not are like, that's the nice thing about being based on basic D&D is that you can do you can be brief with some of this stuff, but it's a lot of research to get the stuff that goes in here. But I have not been idle. We've what was that, Tor?
I was just going to say his ambition is to cover the whole of the world in 1648.
I can do it. I can. I have the format. I have the format, and I have the rest of my life.
That's the joke. That's the joke on him right there.
I just need to get this next book of mechanics out. You'll see, sir. The shit that I have waiting in the wings is so good. I need to build up the mechanical infrastructure of the game to support some of the historical stuff that's going to come, which you all will understand once you see what I'm working on.
And have you been testing this on Roll20 or any virtual tabletop spaces?
Yeah. I had my guy, the same guy who did the Torchbearer character sheet. I had him build a character sheet in Roll20 for us, and we just did a play test this fall, and it was way more fun than we should have had. Like a game called Miseries and Misfortunes should not be that fun. But it's funny. There's some affordances that are nice there, but the last playtest, I really this was like 2 years ago when the last big playtest we did before we released that version of the game, the kind of beta version. I really embraced the kind of grid-based combat era of D&D, which I've never designed in before, and it was really fun. It's a really fun space to design in, and we had the big climax of that adventure was a battle with bandits at the ruins of a Roman wayhouse, and we had little standees, on a vinyl mat where we had drawn the map of the ruins, and holy cats, that was fun. Right, like the bandits had a cannon, and they had to grenade the cannons emplacement, and it was ridiculous. It was so fun. And so this time around on Roll20, we have the nice grid-based integration automatic in Roll20. It was actually really cumbersome. I was shocked by how cumbersome it was to have to prep all of that, and then to be like moving all those pieces around in Roll20. For the same encounters that I did, in the playtest version, I was doing them again, revised and updated, but largely the same. I found it to be surprisingly cumbersome. So yeah, there's some, they're like, but having a die roller, having the character sheet automatically tracked and all that stuff, like that's super cool. But there's still some stuff that
I find that my prep work, when I'm using Roll20 is just way more than an in-person session.
I'd agree with you as someone who's done a little bit of both. It's easier when you're just at a table with other people and you just the papers and stuff to work with. So I definitely concur with that for sure. But at least with our current circumstances, it's nice to have the option. So
amen.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I guess a follow-up question I have to that is, since we're talking about the future, are you guys planning on going to any shows coming 2022? Any conventions, anything along those lines?
Oh yeah, we're going to exhibit at Gen Con. I was there for Gen COVID in October, and they did a good job. Gen Con did a really good job of handling the various exigencies of, hosting one of these events. And while Indianapolis seemed to have, kind of suicidal thoughts about protecting itself from a raging contagious virus, the Gen Con attendees were all super cool. Everybody was really chill about having to wear masks or do whatever. So I'm confident that Gen Con will continue to have safety as the priority this year. So I'm planning on going back, and then we'll be back at Unplugged, and then we'll see. Maybe East. I don't know. But at least Gen Con and Unplugged. I want to show Gen Con Torchbearer. I think
Yeah.
people are going to be psyched when they like see it all laid out on the table. I think they're going to lose their minds.
So how was Gen Con? It beat your expectations, I guess. The sales and everything, the attendance,
We
the
didn't have a
player
booth at Gen
engagement.
Con.
Oh, you didn't have one?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That is
That's what I'm
that's why
curious
I'm
about.
so positive about it. It's because I didn't have to work. I did a couple panels and then just had some meetings and talked to some folks. And so it was great. I actually had never been to Gen Con and not like worked a booth. Um, so that was incredible. But if it wasn't for the serious downside of the health issues, like I can't put Tor at risk or Dro at risk or whatever. Like like no one can catch COVID from working a booth, right? It's just like not allowed.
Yeah.
So, but if it wasn't for that, if there was some other issue that was dropping down attendance at Gen Con, I would have been there regardless because what I found, like we've done a lot of shows where there's no one there, and you often can have like really good times at those shows because people are hungry. Right, the people that are there are really really hungry to make a connection. They're hungry for something new, and so yeah, and that's what I saw like from my friends who were exhibiting at that show. There were a few who were still exhibiting. They said they did really well at Gen Con in October, and they didn't have any regrets.
Have you done GaryCon?
We haven't exhibited there. I attended once a couple of years ago, and it was also super fun. It's intense.
Yeah, I would recommend it, especially with what you're working on right now, which is based on like basic D&D. You've got a huge audience there that are huge fans of the old Gygax stuff, and they're old timers. They love the basics, AD&D, and stuff, the roots of our hobby. And so if you're coming in with something that's built on that foundation, they're just going to gobble it up. So that'd be a really good one for you, I think.
It's a great recommendation. You're right. As soon as things are a little more stable in terms of travel and attendance and whatnot, yeah, I would love to do GaryCon as exhibitor.
Yeah, because we've got that set up for March, and then PAX East probably in April. I'm so on the fence with PAX East because it's unbelievable. These guys have been so tone deaf in terms of pricing. Every other convention has been very, very understanding of the situation of publishers, of our industry, of stores being shuttered, distributors barely hanging on, several publishers closing their doors, and they've sent out the price lists, and they're higher than 2019. And as a publisher, you're going, I don't know what kind of ROI I'm going to get there. Are people still going to be afraid with Omicron and travel restrictions and things like that? And every other convention has lowered the prices because they understand the risk. And so this one, even though it's a super good show, like all the PAXs are very good shows but I don't know, these guys, I don't know, someone needs to give them a swift kick to the ass, wake up call.
As someone working a booth, I think that attendees have a very different experience with PAX East, but because they put us in the hall that's open until midnight.
Oh shoot, yeah.
It's a really frustrating experience because you want to shut down. You've been there for 8 hours. You want to get out of there.
Well, you could ask to be put in the video game area. That's where we usually go. We've tried both.
Yeah,
We've done
so
both.
Loud.
It is loud. Yeah, I usually lose my voice. But we do the same amount of sales, but with less hours. So we usually prefer the video game side. Yeah. Yeah. So.
But all things being equal, I'd rather be unplugged.
Yeah. Agreed. Awesome. Well, do we have any questions from our audience on the stream? I don't know. Ken's been chaperoning, I think, the streamed. Do you have any questions there? Aaron,
there's a slight delay, so we're gonna have to fill up some air here while they get to the point where they actually hear the actual part where they're asking if there's any questions.
Oh yes, the lag.
But I'm okay with doing some idle chatter.
Some kind words though. People talking nice about Mouse Guard. So legendary and beautiful. Yeah.
And I did actually want to mention, I think I met you both actually once upon a time at our first PAX Unplugged, or it might have been the first PAX Unplugged. I don't know if you guys remember. We were like actually just adjacent booths wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember chatting up with you, Tor, and so I find that actually really funny that, you know, after all this time, I happenstanced into a conversation with you guys again. All right, so
That's a small world, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun world, though, so. All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have anything coming from their general directions. So at this point, we usually grab our cup and we basically say, thank you for joining us today. I also want to give special thanks to our producer today, Ken, who's basically been behind the scenes helping me out with things. So kudos to him. And, well, skull.
Cool.